Hello and welcome to the Womxn Show. I'm Lenina Rassool, and today we are getting a dose of inspiration, transformation, and healing by inspirational speaker and poet and leadership coach Lynn Hill. Now, Lynn has been on the show before. She's also the author of a wonderful book called Butterfly, My Soul Got Wings, What Life Has Taught Me. And today we're going to bring some of the transformative concepts and healing modalities into the studio. The world has not been an easy place to exist in lately, and we are hoping that through this episode, we can bring some tools to help us all cope better. But before we go into conversation with Lynn, we are going to have a look at a short video. Let's have a look.
Butterfly, a tiny padlocked metal cage, this has been my long abode. I forced my precious wings to fold till my soul became of age. I never saw my true colors. I never spread my wings. They fluttered at the thought. They wished to hear the key. My wings and I so wished that we'd someday be free, and yet it was my colors, intense and bright and new. Meshed metal melted mysteriously. I flew and flew and flew towards clear-colored azure skies, scattered with golden angel dust. Finally, my wings and I have claimed our precious, rightful space. I am the colors. I am the wings. I hold the key. I now am free. The book was really birthed from a very, very traumatic experience, a near-death experience, in fact, at the age of 15. I was sexually brutalized to a point that I had nearly died, but came back, crossed over, and it was not my time yet. I lived through, I was spared. And so it was not so much, I don't think I was spared from death to simply tell my story. I think I was spared from death to share the lessons that had led to the triumph of just the space that I wanted to be in, and that was one of a victor and not of a victim. So while the book was birthed out of that experience, the book certainly is not about rape. The book is about healing and it's about transformation. It touches on universal principles like freedom, captivity, forgiveness, fear. It touches on those principles that ultimately lead to authentic freedom in the highest of ways. And it's definitely not just about rape. I would love to see it as a symbol of healing and as a symbol of transformation that would be able to edge others on in terms of living their best lives. The fact that we are never products of our experiences in as much as we become products of our responses to those experiences. And that really is what the book is about.
That was a short video on Lynn and her book, Butterfly, My Soul Got Wings, What Life Has Taught Me. We are going to take a short break, but we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and I'm so excited to have Lynn Hill in studio. Lynn is an inspirational speaker and poet, transformation practitioner, and leadership coach, and the author of one of my favorite books, Butterfly, My Soul Got Wings, What Life Has Taught Me. Lynn, welcome back, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having created the platform, and good to be back.
Okay, thank you. So, Lynn, you know, we are here today. We're going to speak a little bit about your first book, and I will give a little bit of teaser. It's anticipation of us speaking about her second book, which is soon to be launched. But for today, we're speaking about Butterfly, My Soul Got Wings, What Life Has Taught Me. And this was published 4 years ago in 2019. And Lynn, you wrote this book to share some healing modalities and, just lessons that you have learned with the rest of us. So I want to start with, please tell us about this book and tell us about the process in which it was birthed.
I think I'm going to start with the latter part first, how it was birthed. The fact that, and birthing, it was so literal in the sense because it took me exactly 9 months to write the book. And when I realized it, as I put the pen down for the last time, it was, wow, I have birthed something. How it came about was me always knowing that I had to share whatever life had thrown at me and the experiences that I had triumphed over. If I didn't share those, I would have nullified the experiences and the lessons. And for me, the purpose of all of it was to share. So it was knowing all along that I had to write something. It was just a matter of when. And I also knew, and I attempted a few times, but my healing had not run its full course yet. And so I didn't quite get it right from the first, second, and third attempts. The other thing was, post my workshops and my talks, people would say, where do we access your book? And, there was days I was too embarrassed to say, there ain't a book yet. And then yet became the operative word. But the more they asked, the more I knew heaven was speaking. And then I think 25 August 2015, that was the last time. It came from a very astute publisher who said to me, it's time, Lynn. I just after our conversation, I buy into the spiritual worth of the book. And so that is how it came about. And through it all, I guess it was the accentuation of and the deepening of my purpose. The fact that through the book, my divine mandate was extended and the scope of my influence was extended to the degree that when others are able to feel your presence and your voice in your absence, that's legacy work. And I guess my book was the motivation for it was exactly that.
Wow, Lynn. I've had you on before, but we haven't actually ever told that story. And I have to say that is so beautiful. And I want to thank you for sharing that because, I meet women all the time who want to write their book and are so intimidated. And I think of probably when you were saying, it's actually, there were previous attempts and it hadn't worked. It's very affirming, I think, to everyone who tries once and it doesn't work out. And so thank you for sharing that wonderful story. Lynn, you also, you said something here that I just want to get to then. You said, you had made these previous attempts, but my healing had not run its full course yet. And you recognize that was why, I'm assuming, just like it couldn't finish the first time, it couldn't finish the second time, it couldn't finish the third time. And I have to say, I've read the book, and so what comes through in there, and that was my second question, was that to speak a little bit about the healing modalities then, because it comes through as someone who has been through immense trauma. You had been through immense trauma, which you worked through in the book. One of them, if I may say, was a brutal rape when you were a teenager, and this is something often, I had thought about when I look at some of the ways when you were put on platforms, because it was such a big event, and often when you're asked to speak in GBV forums, that rape often forms the central part of the story, the central part of the introduction. But when I read the book, it wasn't. And I was so surprised by that. And I was so, I'm trying to find the right words. You can feel that you've gone through a healing process in the book, in the way that it comes through to other people. And so, I wanted to ask about the process for you then reaching that stage of healing, being able to speak about it, being able to not center this rape as the center of your story. How did you reach a point where you could, approach the experience in this way?
I'm also realizing that I never quite answered the other part of your question, which was, what is the book about?
Yes, okay. So let's start with what the book is about, and then move into how you were able to structure it this way.
Absolutely, but very succinct, Lenina, in saying that it is not about GBV. In fact, there's one chapter in my book that goes into the experience at 15, but the chapter really is about forgiveness, and that was one of the most powerful contexts in which I needed to find myself and to find it within me to forgive. So the book is about my journey, but it touches on universal spiritual principles such as emotional and spiritual captivity, personal freedom, authenticity, overcoming fear, resilience. What else is there? And I think in doing that, I was really conscious. I wanted to connect with the reader. I wanted to deeply connect with the reader. And we all have experienced certain aspects. So my story is not mirrored in another's life because all our journeys are so uniquely relevant to who we are. But I wanted the reader to be able to connect deeply with aspects that speaks to everybody. All of us aspire to get to a point of self-actualization where we are joyful and where we are free and where we are living deliberately and on purpose. And I also wanted the reader to know that it's possible. I think in all of it, I was trying to say, own your story with all of your heart, but self-define as a result of your story. Don't allow the harsh aspects of your journey to define you. And so, the Marianne Williamson quote just comes to mind here again. As we let our light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fears, our presence automatically liberates others. And I wanted the book to be a healing and a liberating tool for others who not only found themselves in captivity, but for those on a journey of escalated consciousness, because the journey has no distance. Excellence has no distance. So it was not written for only the wounded. It was written for us to develop into the greatest versions of our higher selves, excuse-free.
And I absolutely love that. And I think that's what came through for me also. And I had been expecting, I think just to reference my last question, I had been expecting a book about GBV. And what was so surprising and I think even intimate about it was that exactly what you said. It wasn't a book about GBV. That experience that happened to you was just one part of the story. You said something now really beautiful. You said, don't self-define as a result of your story or as a result of the hard things that have happened to you in your life. And so my next question was going to be, some people do define themselves. Some people really struggle to move on from difficult experiences, and they almost come to define their lives, whether it could be abuse or violation or unemployment or physical illness or disability. Even we see, even in death of loved ones, sometimes things are so huge that the rest of our life almost seems built around it, or the rest of our identity almost seems built around it. And I wanted to ask Lynn, what do you say to people who feel stuck, who feel defined by the circumstances they have lived through and who struggle to sort of move on from it?
So I'm going to combine the previous question, the second part of the previous question with this, if you don't mind, because I think it just is so interrelated. One of the things that I did two things organically without knowing. As that 15-year-old coming out of 72 hours of sedation post the rape, and then a few months later, also just very organic, or 3 weeks later, few months later, speaking out in court in the High Court of Cape Town. But what happened was waking up and seeing this horror mask. I had to force my eyes open to see this mask, and my face looked like a horror mask, and that was the degree of brutality. But what happened in that first moment, and only, as I prepared for the show, it was, wow, Lynn, that was your technical disowning of something that you could have worn, literally. So when I looked at the mask, at the beaten face, the disfigured face, what I said to myself is, this is not who I am. And I think when I said that, automatically within me, I unleashed a space for reclaim. As that little 15-year-old baby girl, to say, this is not me. This was done to me, but this is not Lynn. I don't recognize myself. I'm physically unrecognizable. That was the one thing. And I think that was my first moment of self-definition. The other was 3 weeks after feeling brutalized, broken, and bashed. Soul, mind, body, even heartbroken. 3 weeks after that, I said, you could have done all of this to me against my will, without my consent. But the one thing you were not going to damage was my dreams. Without knowing concepts of reframing, of transformative thinking, none of that, just this child who I guess always valued her dreams and her academic life for as long as she could remember. That was me saying that I will not be a victim of this, that no violation or perpetrator is worthy of stealing and thieving me from my God-given destiny and the utilization of the gifts and the talents that was placed inside of me. The other thing was using my voice, actually expressing my truth and saying, this has happened. And remember, this was 1983, Lenina. So we're speaking where rape was not spoken about. It's still not spoken about as it should be. It's still not reported as it should be. But we were deep into patriarchy, and we were deep into apartheid as context, and very few. In fact, I think I was the first female of color, child of color, to actually have my case appear in then called the Supreme Court of Cape Town. Why I cite those 3 examples as organic responses to what happened. The third example saying, I used my voice, however broken I felt, to give others a voice. Allegedly, I was not his first victim. So I think by using my voice, it was also my just organically regaining my strength to know that my voice mattered, that my truth mattered. And a part of what I'm sharing now is the healing modalities as well, as also saying to others, we cannot be a victim and a visionary at the same time. And 3 weeks after I was brutalized to a point that they thought a train had ridden over my face, I chose to wear the lens of a visionary still. 2 years ago, I wrote the following quotation, which I was unable to articulate at 15 and I guess in my 20s and 30s, but it just puts it all together. And it says, it takes the same amount of soil to dig a grave than it does to plant a garden. It was when I could have been buried that I chose to be planted. We all have this choice to choose how anything affects us. And to the last point of what you were asking, what is my message to those listening who are feeling stuck, who are feeling I can't move beyond where I'm at? My message is that no single one of us was meant to stay in the graves that even others dig for us. That I never ever waited for the grave to disappear before I started planting my garden. In fact, dreaming was part of my healing. Um, and and the fact that my success and my dreams, that was just non-negotiable always in my life. Um, if that current reality had to become my destiny, I would not have been able to bless the world with my gifts and talents. And my book and my message to those listening today feeling stuck is that God does not place more gifts and talents in some of us than he does in others. It's just that some of us are not born into advantaged communities. I was born into apartheid. There were days when all I had deep in my adulthood was my dreams, my purpose, and the gifts that God had placed inside of me. But there were days I didn't even have petrol to get to the next meeting. But the one thing that I knew was that every meeting I needed to go to was an opportunity to showcase what was on the inside of me and what I allowed to not be diminished because of trauma and because of pain. And so to those listening today, it's about make your vision and your dreams your greatest non-negotiable. When you make that a non-negotiable, failure and disappointment and all of the diminishing effects that comes with rejection and all of the stuff that all of us need to go through will diminish that. And someone in this world needs what you have to offer. And all of what you have to offer is already on the inside of you. And it's our responsibility to access that. It's our responsibility to heal. It's our responsibility to dream those dreams and build those visions that will move us outside of that current reality. And sometimes when we can't move outside of a current reality, the one thing we can do is choose to respond differently to that reality. And I guess that's what I did.
Wow, Len, I am feeling that all of that so deeply, and I think like the piece that really stood out, and I think that will resonate with a lot of people, is that you said no matter what someone else did, no matter what what the external thing is that happened to you, you still retain. You are still who you are, and you still retain the power and the dreams within yourself. I love that so much. Thank you for sharing it. Lynn, we need to take a short break, but we will be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and we are in studio with Lynn Hill, inspirational speaker and poet, transformation practitioner and leadership coach, and the author of Butterfly, My Soul Got Wings, What Life Has Taught Me. And before the break, Lynn, we were speaking about the book. We were speaking about the process that you went through to get to the book. And I remember we were ending off with a beautiful quote that you said you had written 2 years ago. Without knowing concept of, sorry, no, that's not the quote. It takes the same amount of soil to dig a grave than it does to plant a garden. It was when I could have been buried that I chose to be planted. I think I'm missing a verse.
We all have this choice to choose how anything affects us.
We all have this choice to choose how anything affects us. And then you gave them examples of, after this brutal experience you had been through at 15, you had 2 or 3 moments of like, at such a young age, and you said without knowing concepts of reframing or transformative thinking, you had these moments where you looked in the mirror and you thought, this is not me. This doesn't have to be my identity, this thing that happened to me. And I'm taken with that because we are not taught concepts of reframing and transformative thinking, for example, in schools. for example, our parents wouldn't have known about it. I'm fascinated by the time that we are living in now, where we have a lot more access to information like this, to build a sense of self and to build an identity that is separate from the things that happen to us. We see this emerging, but there's a lot of people who still don't even know about these things. So I wanted to ask, before we go into maybe some of the healing modalities, if you can even just explain, what does that mean? What does it mean to have a sense of self? What is the concept of reframing mean?
I think having and owning that sense of self is knowing that I've been created to not have my presence be accidental on earth, that I am here and have been placed on this planet with the inner resources to fulfill the outward mandate and to create impact in the lives of others in this world. That I cannot do that if I don't know who I am, what I stand for, and what my aspirations are, and how I'm going to translate these gifts and talents that has been given to me and that I've been blessed with into services and products that is going to be of benefit to humanity. And so authentic identity for me is it's just so integral in how we go about our daily tasks. Purpose, our daily tasks is part of our purpose. Purpose is not something huge and out there. It is how we go about just what we do based on who we are. Authentic identity was very difficult to develop that sense of self when you were born into two limiting ideologies. I was born into patriarchy, and in 1967, I was born into the heart of apartheid. So we unconsciously as children assimilated these limiting ideologies, and we were positively reinforced for being obedient to how we lived out our parents' expectations of how they wanted us to behave. And thinking back now, children should be seen and not heard. That was just the whole voicelessness thing playing itself right out into our households. So authentic identity, I will not be able to express my voice in this world authentically if I'm not standing in my authentic identity. That my authentic identity is not influenced, my sense of self cannot be influenced by the limitations and the negativities of the beliefs that I was born into and that I just unconsciously assimilated. And so I had to stand up very young for that, I think, Lenina, that I would not be diminished. Because we become unconsciously diminished by the ideologies and how we brought up and unconscious parenting and just all of those things. But as that little 15-year-old girl, I pat her and I love her so much more now at the age of 56 than I did 20 years ago, because I honor her bravery and I honor how at 15 she stood up for her truth. When all of what was happening around her became a lie. When I stood up for apartheid as a 17-year-old chased off white beaches by policemen, and I learned a bit of German by then, and all I would say was, "Entschuldigen Sie bitte, ich verstehe Sie nicht." I don't understand why you're chasing me away. Because as that 17-year-old girl, 2 years after she had been raped, she was defined enough to know that she deserved every beach bench, man, that she didn't deserve rough sands, that she didn't deserve certain places and spaces. And so I think that sense of self was just always so strong within me. And obviously, as I grew spiritually and evolved, it became stronger.
I love that so much. You're making me think of the quote, and I think I'm paraphrasing, but who were you before the world told you who you are? And so I think, you know, to sort of within the patriarchy and the apartheid, I mean, that was the point. They were telling people that they were less than because they're a woman, or less than because they are not white. And the fact that you had the courage to stand up there and to stand rooted, I think, in your sense of self is so inspiring and is a lesson to all of us. And I think, Lynn, you were going to share, you said, some of the tools or some of the healing modalities, just a few of it. Obviously, I wish we had more time, but a little bit of that from the book to bring out to us, to tell us, you know, what is I think some tools to help us along on the journey, then, rather.
Absolutely.
A sense of self.
And for me, it was really, it all comes together in 5 things very quickly that led from the grave to the garden. And again, I say, I never waited for the pain and the fear to disappear. I did and continued despite the presence of the pain and the fear. The first one was finding the purpose in the pain, knowing that I could not have gone through this level of brutalization for nothing. And so at the age of 16, I started to ask myself and search and find what that something was. And I knew that I would use this experience for not only my gain, but for humanity's gain. And it's one of the motivations of why I went and studied psychology. The second part of it was that I chose 72 hours after. I chose a few weeks later, 3 weeks after, 10 months after. I chose to not be in my past. I knew that I could not create my future by living in the past, that I needed to be present, that I needed to be relevant and make relevant choices aligned to the dreams that I still wanted to fulfill. And so I chose consciously to be that visionary and not a victim. And when we combine choice with focus, where I chose where I wanted my focus to be, why would I want my focus to be in the past when the past would lead me nowhere? And focusing on the future and the choices and the actions I needed to make in the present would not only lead me somewhere, but it'd be aligned to my destiny and my purpose. And when we combine choice and focus, we get perspective. And perspective really is the lens through which we view any experience. And just now I was about saying, even when our current realities don't change, but the lens changes with which we view that current reality or the challenge, it will change the nature of the experience, and it also changes the nature of the effects that experience brings about. The fourth thing was the role that 5 minutes to 60 minutes then, and of course I was raped for a second time 5 years ago. Why? What is the role that gratitude plays? Gratitude, I believe, defines perspective. I was grateful the first time that I didn't die when I could have, because I lost consciousness. I was grateful that I was able to have 2 children when I was told my internal injuries are too harsh, too serious. I'd never be able to bear children. But I think just grateful for the fact that I was spared from death, fed my purpose, because being spared from death meant that I was living. And it wasn't just to live, it was to live with a higher, more deliberate, more intentional stance. And the fifth one that led to ultimate freedom and my healing was forgiveness and release. It took me 23 years, but eventually I did forgive, and eventually I released. And those 5 tools, purpose in the pain, the matter of choosing and us having the gift of choice in any moment as to how we respond to anything. Perspective, gratitude, and forgiveness. Those were my tools that assisted me on my journey towards freedom and now personal bliss.
Wow. Then I mean that is so very powerful. I remember we had a conversation about we had a deep conversation about forgiveness because I didn't quite believe in it at the time. And I remember messaging you to say the way that you had framed it, for instance, in your book was quite transformational for me. And so maybe we should have an episode on forgiveness one day. But I do want to say there has been amazing feedback to the book. So you spoke very much about using your voice, using the book, never waiting for the pain and fear to disappear while you were doing this and standing firm in this purpose that you are going to make something out of these negative experiences. You are going to share these healing modalities, and you've shared some of it, and people have in turn responded and said that the book has helped them. How does it make you feel? What is some of the feedback? Did the feedback surprise you? Did the feedback bring a different element to you? Was there anything that stood out for you?
I think for me, Lenina, and any writer would know this, and you're a journalist, and you get to a point of writing and sharing, and when you read it, you say, oh, it's a load of crap. Oh, is this really going to work? I think my very, very first review was, and thank goodness I didn't believe that woman. And again, it's people look at me and it's like, oh, things were rosy, and look at her now. Things were never rosy. It was always the fact that I chose to go higher, that I chose to use that obstacle as a stepping stone. I know it's a cliche saying, but I made the cliche come alive, that in every obstacle lies an opportunity. And when that first lot of feedback came back at me, it was, okay, how do I use this for my benefit? How do I use it? Because here's something that can again send me to a grave. How do I use it to plant the garden? And it was, okay, take all of what you consider constructive in this, reformulate, reformat. And that's what I did. So the feedback has been phenomenal. The book is endorsed by the Honorable Professor Shirley Zinn, whom I value very much, who is a mentor of mine as well. The feedback validated all of the effort. To know that my book is making a difference, not only in the reader's life, but in the lives of all of those whom that reader touches. That is also the fact that the book has been a creator of a ripple effect. The fact that I was able to bless Monday, my favorite petrol attendant, with a copy of the book, and the book traveled through his household and into his community and made a difference to a point that they came, stood around the car on a day and started chanting book 2, book 2, book 2, book 2. So Monday shared it with his colleagues, and this is the power of what one book can do. And my vision was that it was never for coffee tables. It was never for exclusive books. Yes, it's listed on exclusive books. Yes, it's on Take-A-Lot. Yes, it's on Amazon. But it was never meant for that. It was meant to enter prisons. It was meant to rehabilitate rapists. It was meant to land in schools and universities as a textbook. It was meant to land in mental health facilities. So the vision was always huger than the coffee table. It was huger than South Africa. My ultimate dream is that all of my work, all of my inspirational work, the written and the otherwisely, that it becomes accessible to the marginalized globally, that somehow inspiration and reading just became this it's still a matter of financial accessibility. And I want to break that barrier. I want to make my work accessible to all the marginalized, inclusive of the less abled in this world. And that, I guess, is a greater accentuation of my purpose. So the book is yet to run its course. It's got places and spaces to occupy.
I absolutely love that story, and I think that's so powerful in terms of also how information can heal. Also, again, as a journalist, it's easy for us to become really depressed. The feedback is not always consistent. But knowing that just the writing of it, the using of our voice, the sharing of our experiences can have a healing effect on people is really powerful. Len, I want to come to something quickly. You said, some of the things that people have said. Oh, they think that things were rosy, but they really wouldn't. These are that's their lens, the perception of, things were rosy. Look at her now. You also said something about doing the work on one's sense of self and then reaching bliss. And I just want to, speak about how bliss is not necessarily the absence of adversity. That challenges you. Yeah. So what is a frame that we can use for what bliss could look like?
I think if I used some of the modalities that I just mentioned, for me, my daily practice right now is gratitude. And for every blessing in my life and anticipated blessing that I am already grateful for, that creates a sense of joy. And choosing to focus on the blessings rather than the burdens is definitely something that it frees me on a daily basis. The concept of reframing, which I never got to explain earlier, which ultimately boils down to finding the advantage in the adversity. So you and I know that even today, practically, I was meant to be in studio, and that couldn't happen. But what was there had to have been some advantage in the adversity. The adversity and the obstacle could not define whether this happened or not. Yeah. The non-negotiable was that this was not just going to happen, that this was going to happen so soulfully and so dynamically. And so to make it a lifestyle that even when things don't go our way, that we seek the blessing in the crisis, that we are able to reframe and say, okay, what is the opportunity in this obstacle? Because that is a perspective shifter just there, rather than to over-entertain the challenge. Because when we over-entertain the challenge, even at an unconscious level, we over-exaggerate its effects. And nothing in our lives persists unless we own it.
I love that so very much, Lynn. Lynn, we didn't even get to speak about your second book. So we have to go to a break now, but we're just going to touch on that when we come back. So sure. We are going to take a short break, but we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and we are still in studio with Lynn Hill, inspirational speaker and poet, transformation practitioner, leadership coach, and author of Butterfly My Soul Got Wings, What Life Has Taught Me. And we have been speaking about this transformative book, and we have been having a transformative conversation, so much so, Lynn, that we hadn't even gotten to your new book, which is going to be released in 2024, God willing, all things work out. And so I just want to come in and have a little bit of a teaser about what the second book is going to look like.
Okay, so the second book is called Segments of My Soul More Than Just Poetry. And I think the title kind of says it all, that it is not only poetry, that it is a combination of poetry and prose, birthed again pretty much like the first one, where after my poetry recitals, I would be asked, where do we access the anthology? And the anthology was yet to be collated, written. Some of it is some of my old work, which I edited because my eyes were new, from a more enlightened, more healed perspective. Some of the work is pretty new. My apartheid piece, which started out as a poem and then ended up in a bit of prose, Born Brown, that is where it starts for me. And because I guess that was where my journey started, that it was, as I stated earlier, something I was born into. So it's a deep work. It is, and I think in the intro and the conclusion of it, I say to the reader, may my sharing segments of my soul, may it awaken segments of your soul, in a way that you honor what has been placed inside of you, more sacredly, express it more fervently, and radiate it more unapologetically and gloriously. So again, as a tool to, yes, inspire healing, but to also inspire expression as a healing modality, because that is what it's one of the first steps of healing, when we express. So literally, we have a format of the intro, 5 sections to it, and at the end of each section there is the reflective questions, and there is a page I called dabbling, and the dabbling page is literally the open invitation for the reader to dabble, whether it is with new insights, whether it is on old issues, wearing new lenses, whether it is whatever, but dabble, draw, do, play with words, and have fun while you are journeying inwards, deeply so.
I love that. And Lynn, so you mentioned that at the end, and you were speaking of it now, so at the end of each poem or prose, there is also these reflective questions, which really makes the book, I will make everyone jealous and say I've had a sneak preview, which makes the book actually quite interactive. And so are you seeing it take the path similar to the first book in terms of being a tool and reaching people who need to do, to help them do some healing work?
Totally. And again, not I would say exclusive for healing work only. That we are a continual work in progress. And when we wear a developmental paradigm, I'm open to learning until I take my last breath on this earth. So it is not only a tool for healing. I would say it's a tool for the escalation of consciousness. The journey has no distance. Excellence has no distance. And if you want to go deep and journey with yourself, also just because we get busy, Lenina, we get so busy in all of our roles. We get so busy needing to show up in those roles in an array of ways that without knowing, and again, unconsciously, we get absorbed into all of what we need to do rather than who we need to be. And it is our being and our beingness and the ease of our beingness that informs what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And so I think segments of my soul, more than just poetry, speaks to the essence of anyone's beingness.
Thank you, Lynn, for that wonderful description of the book. I am excited, and I think I love the fact that the book is very interactive, and we shall not say better, just different than the first one, in that the first one was a bit more linear and had these full chapter narratives. This one is sort of, I found you could almost pick it up at any chapter, depending on how you're feeling, and then work through that poetry or prose and those reflective questions. And so I love sort of also just the feel of it being a very flexible tool. But we don't have much time left, so before we go, how can people get hold of current book that's out, Butterfly, My Soul Got Wings? And then when can we expect to see the second book?
Okay, so thank you. Butterfly, My Soul Got Wings is currently accessible on Amazon. It's not as cheap though as Take a Lot. So it is accessible on Amazon in Kindle format, hard copy or soft copy. On Take a Lot, it is on exclusive book system. I know at one point the airport was selling it, and then very importantly for those living in the southern suburbs in Cape Town, it is accessible at P&A Cavendish. It is accessible at P&A Bergfleet and P&A Plumstead. And the launch of the second book, that will be launching on International Women's Day on the 8th of March. Watch the space on social media and elsewhere. I'm super excited. The intention has been exactly the same, to impact, influence, and inspire, and to liberate others so that they can liberate others.
The 8th of March 2024, People International Women's Day next year. We shall be looking out for news of that book, and we look forward to it. Lynn, I just want to say thank you so very much for joining us and for sharing with us.
Thank you. It was phenomenal. You are phenomenal. The show is phenomenal, and I am absolutely blessed and humbled to have shared this platform once again, Lenina. So thank you, and thank you to the Womxn Show.
Thank you so much. And so that is all that we have for today. Thank you all at home for joining us. I am Lenina Rassool. Goodbye.